As we complete our Old Testament review of our travels through the Old Testament on our biblical Route 66, we're looking now at what we call the minor prophets, not because they're not important, but because they're relatively small and quite insignificant in some ways, although they have wonderful messages, and every one of them have very important messages. 12 different men wrote these prophecies. Some of them we know nothing about, except for what we find in these particular prophecies. And so as we look at these together, we're going to fly through them just to pick them up real quickly. We start with Hosea, and the key word is faithfulness, chapter 6, verse 6. God says, Hosea, I want you to go out and marry a harlot, and she's going to be unfaithful to you, and you're going to be an object lesson of the unfaithfulness of Israel to me, and yet you're going to love that woman, even in her unfaithfulness, even as I have loved Israel in her unfaithfulness. And so Hosea proves to be an object lesson of God's faithfulness. Joel is a book of prophecies where our key phrase is the day of the Lord. Joel is going to talk about the day of the Lord, which we find over and over in these prophetic books, that deals usually with judgment that was coming on the people, followed by a time of blessing. And the day of the Lord encompasses both, although quite often it is dealing with the doom aspect of it. And Joel talks about the day of the Lord in 2:28 is our key verse. And he's telling us not only about the contemporary judgment on the people at that time, but also about the future and what God had planned in his wonderful and glorious day of the Lord that will be in the future. And that's followed by Amos. Amos is a book that our key word is prepare, because he says if you do not prepare to follow God, then prepare to meet your Lord face to face. And that's going to be a frightening thought if that happens. Chapter 5, verse 4 is where we find that verse. Obadiah is the smallest book in the Old Testament, and the key word is arrogance. He is talking here in chapter 1, verse 3 as our key word. He is talking about Edom. And Edom is another nation. It's not even Israel. It's a kind of a cousin to Israel. But these people were so arrogant against God that they went out and did atrocities to the people of Israel. And God says, you're arrogant, but I'm going to bring you down. Then we have Jonah, the best known of the books, I'm sure, because of the story that is there. The key word there is appoint, because the Lord appointed a number of things to do his will. Everything from a wind to a fish to a worm to a prophet. Every one of those things he appointed did his will, did exactly what he told him to do, except the prophet. And he got his back up, and he didn't always follow the Lord very well. Fascinating book with a wonderful story to it. Chapter 2, verse 9, salvation is of the Lord, is the key verse. Micah, the key word there is listen, because he has three messages to the people. Everyone begins with the word listen. Listen to me. If you don't listen to me, you will pay the consequences for not listening. So he has those three sermons, and chapter 2, verse 9. Chapter 7, verse 8 is our key verse. Following Micah is Nahum, and our key word there is against. And Nahum is preaching against the Assyrians. This is an awful nation, a ruthless nation, and God says, I am against you. And you don't want God against you. And so there is a verse of Scripture in Nahum, chapter 1, verse 7, that tells us that if you'll seek the Lord, he will not be against you. Matter of fact, with his people, God's people, he is never against us, and he'll never be against us. If God is for us, who can be against us, Romans says. Habakkuk, the key word is faith, and our key verse is chapter 2, verse 4, that tells us that we are to live by our faith, and that verse becomes the key verse for three New Testament books, Romans, Hebrews, and Galatians. Zephaniah, the word is renewal, and that's just a little book, chapter 3, verse 8, that calls for renewal of our lives for him. The last three books are written in the time of the returning exiles. We have Haggai, just a little 2-chapter book. The key word is consider your ways, and do that which God has called you to do, which at this point was to build the temple, which they had failed to do. Chapter 2, verse 4 is the key verse there. Zechariah was a friend, I guess, of or at least a contemporary of Haggai, and the key phrase here is Lord of Hosts. He preaches a number of prophecies centered around the Lord of Hosts, the God of the universe, chapter 4, verse 6. And he gives us at the end, the last 3 or 4 chapters, the best description of the second coming of Christ found anywhere in the Bible. And then our final book is Malachi. The key phrase is you say, because he kept saying to them and quoting them, you say such and such, but I say. And he made them realize that they were not walking with the Lord as they should, and they needed to come back. Chapter 1, verse 2 is our key verse there that says, you say, and the Lord then called their bluff and showed them what was really going on. So here's our overview of the 39 books of the Old Testament. It's been quite a journey. Next week, day 1, we'll take off in our travels through the Route 66 by moving into the New Testament, and we're going to have a glorious time doing so. I hope you jump aboard and travel with us. See you then.